Welcome to The Critique. Today we are reviewing a passionate, highly detailed commentary script that dissects a series of controversial statements, alleged fabrications, and alarming behavior by a prominent political media figure.
Yeah, and I have to say right up front, the source material is fundamentally strong in its raw documentation. It successfully captures a high volume of specific, startling quotes and brings immense passion to the table.
It really does.
So the critique today will focus entirely on high-level editorial refinement, specifically structure and flow, tone and style, and significance and relevance, just to maximize the impact of this incredibly robust foundation.
Absolutely. So let's look closely at the section discussing how this script moves through its topics. You read through the draft, and it really just fires off without a seatbelt.
Yeah, it does.
We go from personal disputes involving Erica Kirk and Tracy Martin straight into defamation lawsuits, then a sudden, jarring pivot to quotes about the U.S. military in Israel.
Right.
And then after that, we're talking about a Scientologist's presidential ticket, and then boom, we land right in the middle of a WebRoot antivirus ad read.
Navigating the sheer volume of distinct controversies presented here requires clear thematic bridges to maintain audience engagement.
Yeah, because it's a lot to take in all at once.
It is. The weakness right now is that this draft reads almost entirely like a stream of consciousness. The writer is jumping rapidly from highly personal drama, like the mentions of those rain angels and debunking the claims about the Border Patrol husband.
Right.
Straight into international military commentary. And then from there, we immediately pivot to a John Mappin Scientology connection, and then jarringly into a sponsor's pitch.
It feels like the author is just trying to sprint through all their research before a timer runs out.
Exact. The trap they've fallen into here is assuming the audience can process information as fast as the author can read it.
That's a great point.
When the material rapidly accelerates from deeply personal grievances to geopolitical rhetoric without taking a breath, it completely undermines the focus of the piece.
Because they don't have time to absorb it?
The audience simply isn't given the mental space to process the weight of one controversy before they are thrust into a completely different arena.
It definitely feels breathless. But I wonder, does that rapid-fire approach actually work for this kind of expose?
How do you mean?
Well, the author clearly wants to overwhelm the audience with just how much wild stuff is happening. If they start categorizing everything into neat little boxes, do they risk slowing down that momentum? You want the listener to feel the sheer weight of the chaos, right?
I hear that, but think about the cognitive load this places on the audience.
Okay.
When you present a takedown of this magnitude, you are essentially building a legal case in the mind of your listener.
Sure.
If a prosecutor stood in front of a jury and rapidly listed off a property dispute, an international incident, a fringe religious endorsement, and then casually mentioned where to buy cybersecurity software all in the same breath,
they'd lose them completely.
Momentum wouldn't feel overwhelming in a good way. It would just feel confusing. You end up with mental whiplash.
So you're saying the severity of the individual points gets diluted because the audience is forced to sprint.
Yes, exactly.
A debunked claim about living in Tucson in the mid-'80s runs right into a discussion about the legality of telling active service members to abandon their posts.
Right. And suddenly neither of them carries the weight they should.
So what's the fix there?
A great suggestion for improvement is to group these distinct controversies into clear, overarching themes or chapters and use explicit transitional phrases to guide the audience from one topic to the next.
Okay, chapters, I like that.
Think of it like taking the audience on a guided museum tour, rather than just throwing them into a messy storage closet and turning off the lights.
That's a great analogy. So how would that look in practice for the early part of the script? Because right now, the Tracy Martin stuff is all over the place.
As a concrete example, they could create a dedicated personal fabrication section early in the piece.
Personal fabrications.
Right. This chapter would exclusively house the Tracy Martin debunking. You gather all the claims about growing up wealthy, the Tucson home, and the Dream City church venue into one contained argument about the subject's willingness to manipulate personal history.
Ah, I see.
By fencing this off as its own distinct category of behavior, you allow the audience to fully absorb the pattern of personal deception before you introduce new variables.
Okay, I see the value in that. You close that chapter, but then you need to actually get the audience into the next category.
Yes, the transitions are key.
Because if you just jump to the next paragraph, it still might feel a bit disjointed.
Right. You have to actively escalate the stakes for the listener. Let's look at transitioning from that personal drama to the military comments. You need a definitive bridge.
Give me an example of how that sounds.
The author might try writing something like, "This pattern of erratic behavior isn't just limited to personal vendettas. It extends dangerously into her broader political platform."
Oh, that's a great pivot.
It works, right?
It acts as a structural reset. It tells the audience, hey, we are done with the personal drama. Prepare yourself for something with much wider implications. It anchors the listener.
It does. It transforms a random list of events into a methodical escalation of severity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of jarring transitions, we absolutely have to talk about the transition into the ad read.
Oh, man. Yeah, let's get into that.
Right now, the script goes from mocking the Scientologists' claim about saving your soul and humanity directly into saying that it's not spectacular, unlike the protection that you get for your computer from web.
Blending those two thoughts is incredibly jarring.
It is.
It almost makes light of the critique they just spent 5 minutes building up.
It bleeds a cynical critique about religious extremism directly into a commercial pitch. It breaks the fourth wall in a way that damages the credibility of the preceding arguments.
Yeah, you really have to separate the editorial from the business.
Exactly. A simple, concrete fix is to insert a hard, clear break in the narrative.
Like what?
They could say, before we unpack the absurdity of this proposed political ticket, let's take a brief moment to talk about digital security.
I like that a lot. That respects the audience so much more.
It really does.
It clearly delineates the editorial content from the sponsored content, which actually enhances the trustworthiness of the host. You don't want your listener thinking your moral outrage is just a segue to sell them antivirus software.
Not at all. When you give the audience clear structural boundaries like chapters for different types of controversy, thematic bridges connecting those chapters, and hard demarcations for advertisements, you remove the whiplash.
You allow the incredibly strong underlying research to actually shine.
Precisely.
Well, let's shift gears to the language being used here. As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the author's tone might be getting in the way of their message.
Balancing strong emotional reactions with objective analysis elevates the overall credibility of the commentary.
Because reading through this, the author is clearly furious. And honestly, given the material, you can understand why.
Oh, absolutely.
But the language they use reflects that anger. They note the subject was dropped off in insane land, they refer to her as this biatch, and they describe the military quotes as batshit. It is a supercharged script.
The weakness here is the heavy reliance on highly informal and emotionally charged language. Now, to be incredibly clear, the outrage expressed in the script is completely justified by the severe nature of the subject's statement.
Yeah, we are talking about someone expressing a desire to physically shake another person.
And actively telling service members to desert their posts. These are alarming extreme behaviors.
Right. So if the behavior is actually that extreme, shouldn't the author be allowed to call it what it is?
I understand that impulse.
If someone tells the military to desert, calling it batshit feels like a pretty natural human reaction. Why do we need to sanitize it? Doesn't that just make the script boring?
It's not about sanitizing, it's about weaponizing the argument.
Weaponizing. Okay, tell me more about that.
When you use colloquial insults to describe these behaviors, it actually distracts from the gravity of the facts. It risks alienating an audience that might be looking for a robust, logical takedown.
I can see that.
More important, using terms like insane land or batshit gives the subject of the critique an incredibly easy excuse to dismiss the entire analysis.
I see. So if you call them a name, you give them an out.
Exact.
They don't have to address the fact that they told soldiers to abandon their posts. They can just play the victim and say, look at this unhinged person attacking me on a critique show.
That is exactly what happens in these media spats. The subject will ignore the mountain of evidence and focus entirely on the one sentence where you called them a biatch.
Yeah, they'll use your emotional reaction to discredit your factual research.
Right. The suggestion here is not to become robotic or emotionless. The passion is what makes commentary engaging. The idea is to maintain that intense passion, but channel that energy into sharp, analytical framing.
Let the facts do the work.
Let the undeniable weight of the evidence do the heavy lifting. The direct quotes about Charlie Kirk, the explicit directives to the U.S. military, the fabrications about Tracy Martin.
Those facts are devastating on their own.
Yeah, by replacing colloquial insults with precise, devastating critiques of the subject's logic and behavior, you corner the subject. You leave them absolutely no room to dismiss your arguments based on your tone.
How do we take that raw anger and turn it into analytical framing, practically speaking?
Sure, let's look at an example.
The author says the subject was dropped off in insane land when discussing the desire to physically shake Erica Kirk. How do you rewrite that without losing the punch?
Instead of relying on a broad, dismissive term like insane land, analyze the specific absurdity of the quote itself. They could try saying something like, the casual admission of wanting to physically shake a malfunctioning person highlights a deeply concerning detachment from reality.
Oh, wow. A deeply concerning detachment from reality. Sounds like a clinical, undeniable observation.
It carries much more weight.
It feels a lot heavier than a schoolyard insult. It forces the listener to actually think about the mechanics of what the subject said, comparing a human being to a malfunctioning appliance that needs to be hit. It's so much more damning.
It is. And let's apply that same approach to the military sector. The current draft refers to the instructions for the military to not fight or to exit the military as batshit.
Right.
While the author's shock, totally warranted, that word lets the subject off the hook. It diminishes the severity of what is actually happening in the real world.
Because telling an active service member to abandon their post isn't just crazy. It's potentially illegal. It skirts the line of inciting mutiny or sedition depending on the context.
That is the exact angle they need to take. What if they tried framing it legally and structurally?
How would that sound?
Rather than calling it batshit, they could revise it to say, the directive for active service members to abandon their posts represents a significant and potentially legally fraught escalation in her rhetoric.
That puts a massive spotlight on the boundary the subject just crossed. You aren't just reacting emotionally anymore, you are documenting an escalation.
Exactly.
But I still have to wonder, does that risk making the piece sound too academic? If we take out all the slang, do we lose the entertainment value for the audience who came here for a takedown?
I don't think so, because the delivery and the pacing carry the passion. You don't need to scream that something is outrageous if you meticulously describe exactly how outrageous it is.
Right.
When you upgrade your vocabulary from raw emotion to surgical precision, you transform your script from a mere venting session into a definitive, authoritative record of the subject's unraveling. You are using the facts as a scalpel, rather than just throwing rhetorical stones in the dark.
It's a much more satisfying listen.
Absolutely.
That actually leads perfectly into the big picture of the script, the actual core message.
Let's get into it.
The material makes a strong case for highlighting these falsehoods by focusing on an incredibly wide variety of grievances. It spans from the absolute minutiae of Tracy Martin's background, like clarifying that she did not ride horses wealthy and that there are no lawsuits against her husband, all the way up to massive sweeping geopolitical statements involving Trump, Israel, and, quote, satanic pedophiles. It is a massive catalog of events.
Extracting a core thesis from these diverse incidents helps the audience understand the broader implications of the subject's behavior.
What is the weakness in the current draft regarding that?
Right now, this draft acts merely as a chronological list of shocking things the subject has said or done recently. It functions like a ledger. It's just a tally of bad behavior.
A ledger, right.
But it lacks a unifying thesis that explains why the subject is doing all of this, and crucial, why it matters to the broader public.
It's just, here is a crazy thing she did on Monday, and here's another crazy thing she did on Tuesday. It's shocking, sure, but the audience is left wondering, okay, so what?
Yes, exactly. Now, the frustrating part is that the author actually touches on a brilliant insight halfway through the script.
Oh, the profit motive line?
Yes, they mention that the subject does all of this so everyone stays engaged with her content and she can make millions of dollars.
That is a massive realization.
It is, but this absolutely crucial insight about the profit motive is buried in the middle of a paragraph about a church venue. It's treated as a throwaway line, rather than being used to drive the entire narrative.
As a huge missed opportunity, the author already has the key to unlocking the whole script. They just haven't put in the ignition.
Exactly.
Without a central thesis, the audience is left wondering why we are talking about a spat over text messages and then immediately talking about military desertion. But if you pull that profit motive idea to the front, how does that change the dynamic of the script? Does it really make that big of a difference?
It changes everything. If you don't provide that connective tissue, the audience might just assume the subject is merely erratic or that the author is just nitpicking randomly.
Right.
The suggestion here is to introduce a strong, guiding thesis statement at the very beginning of the piece. You must plant a flag in the ground in the first 30 seconds.
And then build from there.
And then explicitly tie each subsequent segment back to this central argument. To build a cohesive, undeniable case, you have to train your audience on how to view the evidence you are presenting.
I love that.
Think of all these controversies as loose pearls. Right now, they are just scattered on a table. The thesis is the string that turns them into a necklace.
So we are moving from here is a list of crazy things to here is proof of a specific, cynical strategy.
Precisely. Let's look at a concrete example. The author needs to open the piece with a definitive statement. A great way to rewrite the opening would be to state, "We are witnessing a calculated shift from political commentary to fabricated reality designed purely to farm engagement and generate profit."
Wow, that one sentence completely recontextualizes everything that follows.
It does. It gives the audience a lens through which to view the chaos.
I see. So when we get to the granular details about Tracy Martin, it no longer feels like we are just gossiping about who sent what text message. It becomes evidence of a larger hustle.
You hit the nail on the head. When discussing Tracy Martin's debunked texts or the bizarre claims about the rain angels, the author needs to explicitly link those details back to the opening thesis.
How would they phrase that?
They could conclude the Tracy Martin section by stating, "This isn't just a mistake or a simple misunderstanding, it's a prime example of generating profitable friction out of thin air."
Generating profitable friction out of thin air. That's powerful. Now you've shown the audience why the lie matters. It's not just a lie. It's inventory for the outrage machine.
Exactly.
And you can apply that exact same connective tissue to the international or political segments as well, right?
Absolutely.
When the script moves into discussing the bizarre Tucker Carlson and Scientology presidential ticket proposed by John Mappin, right now it just laughs it off as weird, but that's not enough.
Right. You can't just leave it at, "This is weird." To strengthen the piece, you conclude that thought by tying it directly to the thesis.
Let's hear the example for that one.
They could try saying, "Whether it's launching baseless personal attacks against former friends or aligning with fringe religious elements for political clout, the unifying goal remains constant, staying in the news cycle at any cost."
By continually circling back to that core idea of the profit motive and the desperate need for engagement, the script becomes an airtight indictment of the subject's entire media strategy.
It does.
It elevates the script from a recap of recent drama into a profound media critique. It makes the listener feel like they are figuring out the puzzle right alongside the host.
It gives the material the so what factor. The audience leaves not just knowing what the subject did, but fundamentally understanding the cynical mechanics behind why they did it.
Which is really the whole point.
And that is the hallmark of truly exceptional, influential commentary. It takes raw research and turns it into revelation.
This has been an incredibly productive breakdown. I want to quickly recap the main points of our critique today. First, we identified the need to implement clear thematic structures and transitions, like creating specific chapters for personal drama versus political escalation to prevent audience whiplash.
Right.
Second, we discussed the importance of elevating the tone, channeling raw emotion into analytical, devastating precision that leaves the subject no room for escape.
Yes.
And third, we highlighted the absolute necessity of establishing a unifying thesis, specifically the idea of farming engagement for profit to anchor the various disparate controversies into one cohesive argument.
So, for our listener, the actionable suggestions are very clear. Group your topics logically so the audience can breathe.
Yep.
Use precise, objective language to describe the subject's erratic behavior rather than throwing colloquial insult. And pull your brilliant insight about the profit motive out from the middle of the text and place it at the very forefront as your guiding narrative string.
For submitting this incredibly detailed, well-sourced, and passionate piece of commentary.
Yes, thank you.
The foundation here is incredibly strong, and the research is undeniable. We enthusiastically invite you to implement these structural and tonal refinements and submit your revised draft back into the critique for further review.
We really look forward to seeing the next iteration.
Keep pushing your work forward, keep challenging yourself, and we will see you next time.